Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maura Keefe. I'm one of the scholars in residence here. Welcome to Pillow Talks. We do these talks on Saturday and occasionally Sunday afternoons. Next Saturday, we're going to be in conversation about the relationship between visual art and dance, inspired by the Noche Flamenca performance, Searching for Goya, that will be in the Ted Shawn Theater starting Wednesday. So we'll be back here talking about that next week. There's still so much happening here this summer. You can find out about all the upcoming events, workshops, and talks on the Pillow website or in the festival brochure. And then keep your eyes peeled for announcements of what happens beyond August. Now on to today. The title of today's talk is John Lindquist as of Today. We took the title for this talk from the exhibition that we are we're immersed in, I guess I'll use that word. And before I introduce my two colleagues, a little bit of setup. Dance photography can certainly record and document dance, glamorize its subjects, but it's also an independent art whose subject is dance. There have been remarkable relationships between dancers and photographers. George Platt Lynes and George Balanchine, Martha Graham and Barbara Morgan, Lois Greenfield and David Parsons. There has been a rich history of photography and the Pillow. John Van Lund from 1946 until the mid-90s. Then Mike Van Sleen. Christopher Duggan has been the festival photographer since 2005. In a Pillow Talk several years ago, photographer Jack Mitchell noted that he got his start here as a photographer in the 1950s. He credited Ted Shawn for letting him figure out not only how to photograph dance, but also how to be a photographer. That leads me to today. First bio I'm going to read is John Lindquist. He was in residence here at Jacob's Pillow from 1938 to 1980. He photographed dancers from all around the world and dance forms too numerous to list here today. We're going to hear from Lindquist with some excerpts from a 1980 documentary titled John Lindquist, Photographer of the Dance, directed by Tony Treadway and Bob Brodsky. We're also going to hear about him and his work from today's guests, each of whom has a very impressive bio, which I'm not going to read at length because we'd rather hear from them than me reading about them. First, please let me introduce the Honorable Stephan P. Driscoll. He was an assistant to photographer John Lindquist in the 1970s. Driscoll first came to the Pillow to study dance at the school at Jacob's Pillow, and then he went on, after being Lindquist's assistant, to photograph regularly here in the 1980s. His relationship to the Pillow continues as he is now one of the most valued benefactors. The special collections room behind you was made possible by Driscoll, and he's brought some treasures from his own Lindquist collection, which we're going to hear about. Norton Owen, Director of Preservation here at the Pillow, has been associated with Jacob's Pillow since 1976. He oversees all programs concerning dance documentation, exhibitions, archival resources, while also coordinating talks like this one. Since 1990, he has curated more than 100 exhibitions, including this latest one, John Lindquist as of today. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Before we talk about the exhibition and what it was like to work with Lindquist, I want to hear a little bit from Lindquist himself. And this full documentary is always available in the archives here, and it's in the reading room right now. And I also have to thank the magic behind the screen here. Patsy Garcia, associate. Oh my goodness, I said the wrong name. Patsy Gay is back here, the associate archivist who is helping, and she's going to show us a clip from the documentary. Lindquist, we'll hear from Lindquist himself.
I went to the Berkshires to hear Boston Symphony in '38, and when we passed the road at the end of the Jacob's Pillow road, it said Shawn and his men dancers, and I said, "Oh, take me up there." So they did. And of course I had my Leica, and Shawn saw me dodging picture hats because then there were no raised seat. And he came to me after the performance and said, "We're doing a moving picture of this tomorrow. If you'd like, you may come back and take all the pictures you want, be that no hats in your way." I came back the next morning and took many pictures, and Shawn said, "Oh, of course, you let me see these?" And I said, "Oh, certainly." Next week I came back with some 11, 14 pictures, He was delighted. We became friends and continued our friendship.
What I love is hearing that sort of impulsive moment that becomes kismet for decades to come. And we actually have a photograph in this exhibition from the first year of their relationship. Norton,
yeah, the one in the middle, right behind me here, is from 1938, and it's actually the only one that was not printed from a digital file. This one came from Stephan's collection, so that we might have Ted Shawn and his men dancers represented in this exhibit.
So Norton, could you say how you got the idea for this exhibition? I mean, obviously we are so lucky to live with many of these, not these images, many Lindquist images in the reading room, in the special collections room, and around the grounds. But how about why this exhibition?
Well, I'd have to say in some ways its genesis came from an exhibition we did last year, which was called Welcoming the World, which I co-curated with Tanisha Jones and Hari Krishnan, and looked at, last summer was the first year that we had been international for several years, and we attempted to cover the entire world, which we did in photos. And it was such an inclusive kind of exhibit that allowed so many different people an entry point in. And I thought, well, gosh, I hate to give that up, you know, even though we change exhibits every year, and so we would have to do something new. And I thought about how through a different lens, we could still cover some of the same territory, and realized that where we really wanted to showcase some of what Harvard Theater Collection had been doing with the John Lindquist collection, because there are tens of thousands of images there which they have invested in digitizing. And there's actually a QR code on the wall over there where you can link up to the Harvard website and find them. But all of these, and I should say these were chosen from 15,000 color images that are in the Harvard Theater Collection, but nobody has seen them, or very few people, I should say, have seen. I guess the people who digitized them saw them, but they haven't been shown. John didn't print color. And,
wait, before
yeah.
we talk about that, I want to just I want to bring Stephan into the conversation. I'm picturing you having a sort of similar aha moment arriving to the Pillow. You were here as a student first, not thinking about a career in photography at all. Maybe tell us a little bit about your coming down the road, not in 1938, along with John Lindquist, but a couple decades later, and what it was like when you realized there was this other thing happening on the grounds besides studying dance as a student.
Well, I have to say that I've been very lucky in that I have had many wonderful mentors in my life, but none have had the impact on me that John Lindquist did. And I was immediately interested in finding out who he was, because there was nobody else on the grounds like him. You know, a shock of white hair, and he spoke with that very distinctive Boston Brahmin voice, even though he came from a farm in New Hampshire. But we got talking and found out, yes, he was from Boston, and I, at the time, was working with the National Mime Theater there. And he said, well, perhaps you do some photographs for me. And I said, well, I'm probably not going to give you the type of stuff you usually take here. I'm not going to give you classical lines or anything like that, but if you want to experiment, I'm your guy. And so the very first photograph that he took of me was this one. Yeah, I found this log, and I said, we can do some things with this. So we did a whole bunch of things, me standing on it and over it and under it, and but that was the very first shot.
And that was here.
That was here, yes. Yeah, that was here. And later, was not the same session, but later on in the summer, I had an idea that we could do some things at night with using the headlights from my little Honda. And we did that, and I couldn't find those photos. I looked for them. before coming, but I guess I was sort of like Puck from A Midsummer's Night Dream, because I would stand with a tree in front of me and then make all these gestures and stuff around them, and he loved it, and I loved it, and it turned out to be just the beginning of a remarkable friendship.
So you started to allude to this, Norton, and I think now that we're talking about these photographs here, notable that these are black and white photographs, and we're surrounded by color images. So one of the things that has been a shock, and I have heard over and over again this summer from people walking through the exhibition, is, are these colorized? I've never, talk a little bit about that.
They are not. They were created in color. They were Kodachrome, and Kodachrome manifests as color slides. I mean, that's what we're familiar. Color slides are, well, they can be either Ektachrome or Kodachrome, but they're mostly Kodachrome. And Kodachrome, the colors they're very stable. So even though some of these images are 80 years old or more, they look like they could be yesterday. And that's one of the things that attracted me to the idea, and recognizing that we could show photos and have the historical aspect of them be almost incidental, that they are photos as of today, in a sense, since they are new prints, and that they would have a look of contemporaneity about them, just as a photo that was made today might be. And it sort of, in my mind anyway, and I hope in viewers' minds, that it helps lessen the distance between us and what we're looking at on the walls, because we're not seeing it through a haze of black and white or kind of fuzzy imagery or whatever that distances us from the subject. We're seeing it really in a way that they could have been made yesterday.
Stephan, I'm wondering if you could say something from wearing your perspective, your hat as his assistant, about conversations you had about color versus black and white, and why he shot in both, and if you had conversations about that when he was mentoring you early on in your own photography.
Well, he thought that color was both difficult and easy. It was difficult in that he couldn't make the prints himself, and he was largely at the mercy of film studios that would make the prints. But it was easy because he was able to capture the reality. Black and white has a certain distance, but the color is just so vibrant. And he, on a regular basis, gave lectures and slideshows here and elsewhere, and he narrated them, and it was a fascinating listen. I should also say that when we found out that we were both from the same part of the state, and so after the summer I said, well, we have to get together. When I was a student here, I had a job offer from the Claude Kipnis Mime Theater. And so when the director of the National Mime Theater found out, he fired me. And I ended up actually taking a job as an actor with the Boston Repertory Theater, where John Lindquist did the photography. And so he became more than just a mentor in photography. He was a part of our group. It was all of us people in our 20s, and John, who was in his 80s. And I remember he would say, when I said, we're going to a dance to a disco tonight, I think you should come. And he said, are you sure they wouldn't mind having an old person about? I said, get over yourself, let's go. And he was part of our life. He came to birthday parties and to movies, and just and as when I was cast in a show at the Rep that was supposed to run for a month and ran for 9 months, I frequently stayed at his place because it was a 5-minute walk from the Repertory Theater, and it allowed me to take classes. And and hang out with him. And first thing I learned from him was how to make pictures, not actually take pictures, but the chemistry. And it was, I have this, well, you probably can't see it all that well here, but it is a wizard, a sorcerer, with his apprentice here. And this is, I found this photograph and I sent it to him because I thought that's really how I felt working in his little dark room. And he really was a magician because he would wave his hand over some images and had all sorts of different screens and stuff to change the quality of the photographs. So that was my first invitation to his photography world. Should I go on?
No, let's stop there for a minute because you're learning about the chemistry of the black and white photographs. But now I want to shift for a moment, Norton, to you to talk about. You had the idea, okay, I'm going to go through 15,000 photographs that are in the Harvard Theater Collection.
As you do, yeah.
And aside here, why are they at Harvard and not here?
So the entire collection after John's death was in Stephan's hands to deal with, and he suggested that they come here, but we didn't have the wherewithal to accept that contribution, that donation at the time. We wouldn't have had a way to care for them. And so they went to Harvard Theater Collection instead, and I will say that from what they've been doing recently in terms of digitizing and investing a lot of money in making sure that they are preserved, I still would say, well, that was a good decision in terms of their ongoing life.
You say Harvard has a slightly bigger capacity than the Pillow for funding this kind of endeavor. Got it.
Well, he also had a long-term relationship with the Harvard Theater Collection. He gave them copies of prints. There was also a problem in that John lived in peaceful cohabitation with bugs, cockroaches in particular. He wouldn't kill anything, and so when I told Harvard that this might be a problem because in some of the plasticine envelopes where he kept negatives, I would see little bug tracks. And so the whole collection went to a restoration place where they isolated it for, it must have been about 2 or 3 months just to make sure that there was no infestation on its way to Harvard. And they have done a great job with it. We made stipulations that no one outside of Jacob's Pillow could use the photographs without the Pillow's approval beyond 10 photos.
So I want to go to a couple of clips that we are taking. We've excerpted from the documentary. This isn't how you would see them if you were watching the documentary. That show us Lindquist in action, and then I'm going to ask you to say something about this. So first, we will see Joyce Cuoco and Yuri Vamos in the theater, and then we'll see Christian Holder on the outside space.
1, 2, 3. Lovely. May I have that again? Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
Lovely.
A little bit later.
1 more.
Well, I was too late, you think?
No, a little bit later.
Little bit later.
Oh.
On 4.
Oh, on 4?
Okay.
Oh, all right.
1, 2, 3, 4. Stop.
That's much better.
That was good.
Oh, Yuri, can you release your right arm and still hold her?
The right one was left.
Ah, much nicer. Lovely, thank you. Have it. Now, remember that marvelous gesture when you discover that you have killed her and she's on the earth, and the unbelievable thing that you have done it?
Okay.
This is not anger, but this is the horror of having done something that's incredible. That's it. Good. That's it.
Like, I'll move into it.
And bend, keep bending, and I'll try to stop it. Good, I have it. Ah, better. Wonderful. Good, I have it.
So one of the reasons I picked these two clips is because we see how he worked with the dancers, that he wasn't just trying to capture an image from a performance, but that he had an idea about capturing what would make a photograph. That was interesting. And so Norton, I know you know this documentary very well, and now you know these images very well. Do you have any questions about, like, well, did that actually happen in a dance? Did you think about that?
Well, I think there's one that we're probably not going to see today, but he's got a great line in it where he sees he guides the dancer into a certain movement, and he says, and the dancer says, well, that's not in the dance, and John says, oh, but it should be. Yeah. So I sort of think that speaks for what we're seeing around the room too. I mean, some of them may be moments from the dances. Some just may be what they came to working together one-on-one or two-on-one or whatever it is with the numbers for the camera.
So, Stephan, when you were working with him to make these images and other ones, I wonder if you could say something about how it was different to be coached by a photographer who had a specific kind of visual idea of something versus working for a choreographer or somebody coaching you in miming who had an active, ongoing thing versus capturing a moment of stillness.
Well, it was a collaborative process in that he would direct the dancer, the performer, gently, but he would also take suggestions from them, and then he would follow up with that. These other photos were ones that we did in the studio. This one was when I was still with the National Mime Theater, and this one was just, he had a whole coffer full of costumes, and I was more than happy to try them on. And so we did a lot of studies like that. But he was very, he didn't waste a frame, because back then we had roll of film and you had a certain number and you didn't want to, so he would frequently say, got it? Mm-hmm. And there wasn't, and if he said got it, you knew that you weren't going to do it again probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Norton, I want to ask you about a couple of specific images from the exhibition that Patsy is going to bring to show us close up. The first one I want to ask you about, I want you to just tell the story of the selection of this image.
Yeah, so this is Alvin Ailey and a dancer named, a singer named Nancy Reddy with the Ailey Company in 1959 in a dance blues suite. And I knew from there were not a lot of Ailey photos, but there were a few, and I knew that it would be great to include them. This one really struck me because of his body posture at this point. He is just so down in it. It's just fantastic to see his posture there. Except I had the problem that I couldn't identify who she was. And I thought, well, I'm not going to put them there and say unidentified and Alvin Ailey. So I reached out to Sylvia Waters, who is with the longtime director, former director of Ailey 2, who has been with the company for decades. And she knows everybody. And I sent it to her online and to see if she knew who it was. And she didn't, and it was like, oh shoot. So, and we finally, anyway, long story short, once we had the program to look at and to look at who he was with in duets in particular, we deduced that it was Nancy Reddy, who was a singer, and that made sense that neither I nor Sylvia would be able to identify her because she wasn't a dancer with the Ailey Company, but was a singer.
So the reason I wanted to, when you look at this close up after we're done sitting here, to see Ailey is, you see Ailey of today in this photograph in the dancers' bodies, but what if? I mean, that's the thing. There are 15,000 images. Who's doing the work besides the 60 or so that we're among?
Well, it's an issue. I think it's something that will have to be dealt with in terms of the collection at Harvard at some point, because I will say that very few of them are correctly identified. And that's going to be a problem when there are not people around who can look at them and say who it is, or look at them and refer to some reference materials and figure out who it is. So that's one reason that I was very happy to do these and to feel with many of them. They were ones that were essentially brought back from obscurity, because if they're not identified, you're not going to find them by looking at the collection and typing in Maria Talchif and thinking you're going to see something, because you're not.
Well, while Patsy switches out the photographs, Stephan, I want to ask you about the conversation that John would have with dancers. That I see this sometimes with Christopher Duggan, the festival photographer now. It's that a dancer is willing to be photographed or has time or something like that. So it's not necessarily that it's the most famous dancer in the company, but maybe somebody who's available. Could you say something about how he would approach dancers to be photographed?
Well, it was more often the dancers approaching him, and because he was just such a distinct individual that I think people gravitated to him, because there was no one else that was like him on campus ever. And he would see the performance first, and then he would talk to the dancer after the performance, or the dancers would come to him at some point, and so it went from there. And sometimes he has set up sessions in the theater, and oftentimes it was out on the woods, or there was a platform not far from here on that he would hang a drape, and people would pose there for him. But just to follow up on the, I learned how to photograph from him. Make photos. I learned how to make photos from him. And then I recently found this letter from one of our friends, the group of friends with whom we socialize on a regular basis, and it's from July 10th, 1979. And she says, John mentioned to me about letting you use one of his Leica cameras to take photos at the Pillow during a performance. How exciting. That was also a very big deal for him to lend you his equipment, sacred stuff. Mm-hmm. And it happened that I would sit with him. At that point in time, we photographers were allowed to sit in the front row. And everyone knew who John Lindquist was. And everyone knew who John Lindquist was, and the audience were people that came on a regular basis, season ticket holders, and no one objected, they wouldn't dare, to his very quiet Leica clicking every now and then. But I would sit next to him, and he would hand me a camera when it ran out of film, and I would reload it. And then on this particular occasion in 1979, he handed me one of the Leicas, and he said, "My dear, no time like the present." And that was my first, the first photo I took was of Ib Andersen of the Royal Danish Ballet, and it shocked me that it was so perfect. And it's a lovely shot. And so it was a natural transition for me to follow him. He suffered from prostate cancer, which is something I'm dealing with now, too. And unfortunately, he didn't really trust the medical profession very much. He was what we would call a vegan today, and he tried to cure himself with sunflower seeds and certain types of oils and that type of thing, but unfortunately by the time that they found out what it was far too gone. I'm sure he would have lived to be 100 or so had he taken care of that when he first started getting the symptoms.
So I'm delighted to hear him handing you the camera. It seems like a beautiful action of mentorship in addition to the sort of the talking and being with him. To hand you the camera, it feels like a really great piece of choreography, I guess I'll say. Norton, I want to turn to this picture. This is, I have to say, daily I decide which is my favorite picture in the exhibition, and then it changes. But this one has certainly been lingering for me, and I think it's because of the use of color film.
Yeah, it's a striking color image, and I think the color, again, here is one of the stories about it, because it's Emily Frankel and Mark Ryder from a dance by Todd Bolander called At the Still Point in 1955. And the dance premiered here at the Pillow. It's a beautiful dance, and there's a section of it that's on Jacob's Pillow Dance Interactive, so you can see it online, a couple of minutes from it. And I have to say, it's one of the favorite things of mine that we have on Dance Interactive, even though, yes, maybe I have different favorites, different days too. But one of the things that makes it beautiful is it's, well, as the title At the Still Point might indicate, there's a lot of stillness in it. And that's unusual for something you're seeing in an old black and white film, where usually there's lots of pyrotechnics going on and lots of things that are very active, and instead you're seeing very slow gestures, and it's mesmerizing to watch that on film. But I had only known it as a black and white film until when I was putting this together, I come across this, and it was like, wow. First of all, she had red hair, and then she's wearing this incredibly colorful costume. It just made it come alive in a different way than I had experienced, even though we have a film of it. And, you know, it's interesting how that kind of information can then make a difference. One of the people who we had visiting here earlier in the season was Devin Carney, who's the artistic director of the Kansas City Ballet, a company that was founded by Todd Bolander. So they do At the Still Point. It's in their repertory. And he saw this and was like, we don't have a costume like that. That's not what we do at it. You know, and suddenly you could see he was making plans like, we have to see about changing the costumes that we have for this dance because of what he sees here. So
Norton, let me ask you about the ruthless choices you had to make to what got to be included. And I've been thinking about all the, you know, that there's this premiered here. There's a reason why it should be included. It could also be included because it's a gorgeous photograph. So could you talk about the sort of difference of your personal taste versus trying to curate something about the history of the pillow?
Well, I tried, I would say, with this to not be swayed so much by how famous the person was or, you know, how important the career was. It's a lousy photo, but oh boy, but they're so important. I really wanted to go from whether they were compelling images or not, because I felt in this context, you know, again, as of today, a lot of people wouldn't know who even very prominent dancers like Emily Frankel and Mark Ryder were at that time. People wouldn't know them today. So what I felt the important thing was the quality of the image. And of course, the two things factor in together. I mean, if you've got really famous people and a beautiful image, and then somebody else who maybe isn't as famous, maybe. But there are a lot of people in this. I mean, there are people on the walls here who were students at the Pillow, or who were just a company member, let's say, rather than the headliner. So a lot of different choices were made, and I feel like that's part of the story as well, because it takes all of those dancers, all of those individuals to make what we have here, and each individual is important. So I really relish the fact that dancers of today can come and look at this, and they don't have to think, well, okay, that's Tanakia Leclerc, that's fine, she's famous, that's why she gets her picture here. They can also see somebody who they'd never heard of, and maybe won't find anything in the history books about them either, and yet see that they left their mark here.
So Stephan, when you heard about this exhibition, were there images that you recalled that you were hoping would show up?
No, I was a little concerned about images which John called his, hold on, I'm trying to think of the word, amputations. There was a time when he was, and there were some of them on the walls where the feet are sort of cut off a little bit, and it was because he was getting used to a new camera that he was using, and didn't change the camera or learn to really master it until after the season. And so he never wanted his amputations to be shown. But I think that Norton made some really terrific choices, because these are wonderful images that otherwise probably would not have been seen, and Norton took that extra step. I also want to say that Norton and I have had a wonderful partnership. We were both scholarship students at the same time, and we have continued that friendship and that collaboration. I took a great interest, mostly through what I learned about Ted Shawn and the men dancers and Miss Ruth from John. He idolized them, most especially Miss Ruth. He had a wonderful relationship with her. I brought a couple of photographs that are in the other room there of photos that, a photo in particular that he took of Miss Ruth at the I forget her first name. Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. He knew her as Mrs. Jack Gardner. She of the famous walking her pet lion down, Commonwealth Avenue. And so he arranged for Miss Ruth and Alvin Ailey to be photographed there. But another thing that I want to say is that when we discovered that the costumes from the Dennis Shawn years and from the men dancers were in trunks underneath the steps of one of the studios here, we didn't know anything about preservation at the time, but we certainly knew this ain't good. And fortunately, the transition from one director to Liz Thompson, who was here, she understood the importance of preservation. And so from that, we just both went off in our ways. I started looking for and acquiring materials related to Shawn and Miss Ruth and the men. And it's been a very serendipitous relationship. There's one more thing that I want to say about John. He and Shawn and Jess, they were all part of this intimate family of creators. And they shared intimacies, at least through mail, through letters. And I have one here that that Barton Mumaw,
From the Weather Vane, you might know him
Yes.
there most
notably.
notably.
And there's a photo of him in that far corner there. But this was a letter that John wrote to Barton, and he said, part of it said, I spent the weekend in the Berkshires. The weather was sunny and the color just wonderful. Shawn came back from the hospital. This is 1969, when Shawn was nearing the end of his life. Shawn came back from the hospital a few hours before I arrived. He is getting on very well. His chief worry seems to be whether or not he can get an erection. And it goes on. But And I say that because it was equally important to John. The reason why he never took care of the prostate cancer, because he thought it would destroy his sexual impulse. That was a very important thing to these men, and unfortunately, I think we tried to convince him that nothing's going to change that for you. But it shows the type of close, intimate relationships they all had together.
Here's why you should be a historian. You get to find stuff out like that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I want to also add, in terms of, and you mentioned Liz Thompson, and I will also say that that Stephan's gift to us that made the special collections room possible, he did with a shout out to both Liz Thompson and to John Lindquist, were the two people that he wanted to have memorialized, and it's on the plaque in the special collections room. And hanging under it is a photograph of John Lindquist and Liz Thompson that was made by Stephan Driscoll. And so, those connections are so embedded in this place, and those are the connections that have made all of this possible.
Stephan, I have one last question, which is about your photographs. One of my favorite photographs in the world of Mark Morris is your photograph of him from 10 Suggestions. It's Mark Morris is outside. He's in pink satin pajamas. When's that exhibition going to be? When are we going to see some of those photographs here?
He's looking at me. Well, we do have to get the Stephan Driscoll collection of negatives, and so yeah.
And this is how it goes.
So I want to encourage everybody to come talk to Norton with your questions. He will be standing here among these beautiful images by Lindquist. Ask him which is his favorite for today, what he liked yesterday, and also, as Stephan said, he did bring a few things from his own collection about Lindquist, including that wonderful photograph from the gardener. Oh,
one last thing, because I know you're wrapping up, but I will just say that Berkshire Magazine, we're very honored that they did a 4-page spread of these beautiful photos, and there are 2 big stacks of Berkshire Magazine, of this issue, the current issue, August of 2024. There are 2 big stacks of them over there by the door, so please pick up one on the way out. We don't want to send them to recycling, so please avail yourself.
So come hear some more stories and maybe hear more about that letter. I don't know. Maybe that's we'll see. Thank you both for your amazing work with regard to these photos. Thank you.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you, Stephan.